Is it possible to hypnotise our listeners or our YouTube viewers?
One of the things I do quite a lot for like online stuff are these suggestibility tests, because it is a thing that anyone can try from anywhere and just see theoretically how good their imagination is. The process. You get people on stage, you walk them through some sort of, we call it a suggestibility test, which sounds horrible now I say the words. It's an imagination exercise is what I call it on stage. And it's designed to show us how good their imaginations are. So the old one that's been around for years and years and years is to lock somebody's hands together. You get them to put their hands together like they're going to pray, squeeze their hands together as tightly as you can, and then you start suggesting that their hands are being stuck together with glue or cement or whatever, and then they can't separate their hands. That's one. There's another one that I use a lot, which is called the light and heavy hands test, where you put their hands out and one hand becomes very heavy and the other hand starts to float off into the sky and become very light. And what's interesting about them from an audience's perspective is they can start to figure out who's likely to be really good, because you've got some people whose hands are like so stuck together, their hands have turned purple and their hands are like shaking like mad. Or you've got people whose arms are like way spread apart. And from an audience's perspective, you then get an insight into what might be happening. And then I go along and just literally say the words when I do XYZ action. So in my case, usually when I touch you on the hands, I'm going to say the word sleep, which is a stupid word for hypnotists to use because it's not sleep. But when I say the word sleep, your eyes are going to close, your head will fall forward, you'll just allow yourself to relax. And that's all that happens. I go along, touch their hands, do what I do, say sleep, and they drop off to sleep. Shortly afterwards, you would then wake them all up one at a time and put them back to sleep, or return people down to the audience if they're not going to stay and be part of the show. And again, the first time, there's always an audible gasp the first time you say sleep and the person goes back into that state.
Yeah, I bet.
Because then that's the first time that somebody has just seen their Auntie Sue get hypnotized.
You said it isn't sleep. What is it then?
There's a few different ways to describe it. One of the things is, if you're like driving down the M1 and you were going to pop off at the services and then you realize you've just missed the exit, and you did that because you were in autopilot mode, you're listening to music and you're sort of in a trance state. And what that allows you to do, let's just think about it for a second, is you're in a big lump of steel hurtling down a motorway along hundreds of other cars, and you're doing 70 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Wink, wink. You're doing 70 miles an hour, but that's still fast.
Yeah.
And you were not paying enough attention that you missed the exit for the services where there's still a McDonald's, right? That means that you were indicating, you were changing lanes, you were overtaking, you were changing gear, you were operating the pedals. You're doing everything you were doing in a massive hunk of metal, flying down a motorway surrounded by hundreds of other cars who were all doing the same thing, and you weren't paying attention to it. Really. You weren't consciously paying attention. What's happened is your conscious mind has drifted off into whatever you think you're going to be doing when you get there, or that holiday you're thinking about booking, or whatever else. And your unconscious brain has just taken on and just let you get on with it. And so effectively, that is the state of mind that somebody's in when they're hypnotized. That's effectively what's happening. Wow. Or like when you wake up on a morning and you're not quite awake, but you're not quite asleep. Or when you go to bed on a night time and you're not quite awake, but you're not quite asleep. That same like fuzzy state is very similar to it.
So is it possible to hypnotize someone and them not even know that they're under hypnosis?
Once they're hypnotized, yeah. So there's a funny sort of recurring running gag in the show where I'll just go up and say, eyes open wide awake, and the person wakes up and I'll say, oh, hi, Barry, nice to meet you. Have you ever been hypnotized before? And he'll say, no. And I'll say, you're not hypnotized now? And they'll say, no. And I say, but you've come up here dead excited to be hypnotized? And he'll say, yeah, that's great, but you're not hypnotized now? And they'll say, no. And then sleep, and they just pop straight back off to sleep. And that happens quite a lot. Sometimes they'll go, I don't really know, and they're kind of just a bit confused by it all. This is the other thing that sometimes happens.
So me and Stevie could be hypnotised now then. When we met you outside, you could have hypnotised us and we wouldn't know.
It's possible.
I'm scared now.
Quack, quack. Is it possible to hypnotise our listeners or our YouTube viewers?
One of the things I do quite a lot for like online stuff are these suggestibility tests, because it is a thing that anyone can try from anywhere and just see theoretically how good their imagination is.
Right.
I put one on TikTok ages ago. It went viral and had like 800,000 views in a few days of people. And some people said that worked for me. Some people said that didn't work for me, a bit like being stuck in a chair. Some people said, and some people try and explain it away with just science. They just go, oh, well, no, that would happen even if you weren't using words and trying to get me to do stuff. That would happen anyway.
What was the technique? What was the one?
So there's a thing where you get people to put their hands together and extend their index fingers like this,
Yeah.
and then pull them about an inch apart, and hold their fingers about an inch apart.
Yeah.
And then you start to suggest that there's magnets on their fingers, or that you're tying their fingers together, or something's happening. And slowly over time, their fingers drift together and then feel like they're stuck together. And so I did that. Obviously, at the time, TikTok had a 60-second limit, so I had to like speed up the video and talk really fast, which does lower the effectiveness of it a bit.
Right.
But effectively, we got a load of people saying, oh my God, I can't believe that worked on me, and like tagging their friends to get their friends to have a go. Some of their friends did it and it didn't work on them, because again, this is one of those things where it partly depends on what your preconceptions of it are.
Do they need to be able to see you to do this, or can it just be through audio?
Can just be through audio.
Well, how about if we made this a YouTube clip? Would you be able to look into that and try something?
Yeah. So as you're listening to this now or watching it on YouTube, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to count from 1 to 3. On the count of 1, I want you to put your hands out in front of you, just arms nice and straight, hands about 12 inches apart. When I count to 2, I'm going to ask you to take your left hand and turn it palm upwards. And then on the count of 3, just close your eyes. Again, assuming you're not driving. And then just listen to my voice, and that's all you've got to do. So right now, on the count of 1, put your hands out in front of you like this, palms outstretched, and hands about 12 inches apart. On the count of 2, take your left hand and turn it palm up. So now your left hand is palm up and your right hand is palm down. And then on 3, just close your eyes. And as you listen to my voice with your hands outstretched, I want you to start to imagine that as your eyes close, your imagination starts to unlock. Something that you imagine, once purely imaginary, suddenly becomes very vivid and real, because with your eyes closed, your imagination can start to unlock. The colours become brighter, everything becomes more vivid. And my voice is echoing in your head more because you've got your eyes closed. You've just lost one of your senses, and that makes your other senses more powerful. So as you sit there now with your hands outstretched, imagine for me, just pretend, go with this for a second, that on the palm of your left hand, I'm going to place a really heavy pile of books. This is a heavy pile of dusty, brown, leather-bound library books on the palm of your left hand now. As I talk to you, those books are going to start to get heavier and heavier. They're slowly going to start to push your left hand gently down towards your knee, towards the floor, towards wherever you are right now, getting heavier and heavier, pushing your left hand gently down. Now, don't force that to happen. Don't just move your hand down, but don't resist it either. Allow it to happen. And at the same time, around the middle finger of your right hand, imagine I'm going to tie a bunch of bright red helium balloons. These balloons are big, they're bright red, they're full of helium. See them like on a bright sunny day. As I talk to you now, those balloons are going to start to rise and lift, lifting your right hand up higher and higher towards the ceiling, towards the sky, towards the clouds, towards that bright sunshine. See those balloons getting bigger as we fill them with more and more helium, as those books get heavier, pushing your left hand further and further down, getting heavier and heavier, like there's a bucket of wet sand being tied around your left wrist, pulling that left hand down. Again, don't force it, but don't resist it either. Just allow your imagination to do whatever it wants. At the same time, imagine around the middle finger of your right hand, those balloons are getting lighter and lighter, rising and lifting and rising up higher and higher towards the sky, towards the ceiling, towards the clouds, getting higher and higher. You will not need to stand up if you're sitting down, but your arm will be lifting up higher and higher and higher. And right now, leaving your hands exactly where they are, just stop and open your eyes and have a look at where your hands are. Now, theoretically, the more your hands have moved from their resting position to this, the more hypnotizable and susceptible you are in theory.
Wow.
I love that, because we weren't letting it happen to us. Obviously, we weren't trying it. We weren't doing what you asked. But listening to you, I could pick up on like just how kind of like the imagery you gave in our minds. I could imagine if my eyes were closed, I could picture like how bright red the balloons were, and like the sand and like the books, and like it's so vivid.
Right.
Yeah.
Our producer has just put, I did it and it worked. My hands were really far apart.
So whether this is a YouTube clip or you're doing it and you're listening to the audio, if you listen to the audio, give us a tweet Robert Temple as well.
At the Robert Temple, right?
Yeah.
So let us know whether it worked. Go to Reddit, let us know if it worked. And also YouTube, put in the comments, let us know if it worked. I want to try this once we watch it back.
This will be a YouTube clip for sure. It will.
Class.
So if someone's watching that at home and they've got their phone there and they're sat there and it didn't work, is there anything, could they possibly stand up? Is there a different way in which they could approach the video to maybe become more susceptible, or just no?
Sort of. It's probably the sort of thing where you're probably better to go and try it in the room with a person. So like, come and see my show, buy a ticket. No, come and see my show, or go and see any hypnotist. There's not many of us left, but go and see any hypnotist and have a go in the room.
Right.
And that'll help.
I love it. I just keep looking down at the screen. She's put it all in caps lock. I did it and it worked and my hands are really far apart.
And it gets worse, like this thing, and I'm squirming, and I'm thinking, like, honestly, I'm just wanting the ground to swallow me up. I'm just like, it's just gone worse than I could imagine. It was like a nightmare scenario.